The rag slips from her trembling hand, but she doesn't break eye contact. Harder, the man sneers, tapping the polished tip of his shoe against the marble floor. I said scrub harder. Or you're done. Laughter erupts around him. Four executives in tailored suits, drinks in hand, circling her like predators around prey. Their cologne and whiskey fumes choke the air, mixing with the harsh sting of cleaning chemicals. Mary Ellis, 50 years old, kneels on the floor of Aldridge Financial's executive suite, her blue uniform darkened with sweat. Her knees ache against the stone, her palms raw from the chemical burns of bleach. But her silence is not submission, it is calculation. Look at this, one of them jeers, snapping a photo on his phone. The mighty queen of mops, polishing our kingdom. Another raises his glass, voice dripping with cruelty. You should be grateful. Not everyone gets to serve greatness this close. Their words bounce off the glass walls, loud enough for every assistant and secretary outside to hear. Yet no one enters. No one stops it. Because in this building, power protects itself. Chief Operating Officer Philip Alderman leans forward, his Italian leather shoe inches from her face. Use your hands, he says, voice low, taunting. Show us what loyalty looks like. The others cheer, clinking glasses like it's a celebration. Vice President Thompson lifts his phone higher, recording everything. This will kill at the country club, he laughs. Mary's fingers hover above the shoe, trembling, but not from fear, from fury. She looks up, slowly, deliberately, meeting each of their faces one by one. She memorizes them like evidence, their smirks, their badges, their glassy eyes. Her silence stretches into something heavy, unsettling. And then, for the first time all night, Alderman falters. Something in her stare unsettles him. A storm gathering where he expected surrender. Because what these men don't know, what they cannot imagine, is that Mary Ellis is not simply the cleaning lady they ordered to her knees. She holds a secret, one powerful enough to shatter every man in that room. And in less than 24 hours, she will use it. But for now, she grips the rag with steady hands, wipes the marble floor once more, and swallows her fury like fire. Because tonight, they think they've broken her. Tomorrow, she will break them. The sun rose like molten gold over the city, sliding down glass towers and flooding the streets with warmth that most of its people were too busy to notice. The Aldridge Financial headquarters caught it first, the mirrored dirt building glowing like a monument to wealth. To most, it was a symbol of success. To Mary Ellis, it was a battlefield she'd walked every morning for almost 20 years. Her uniform was freshly pressed, navy blue with a patch that read, Custodial Services. She wore it with a kind of dignity that wasn't about pride in the job, but pride in herself. Pride that no matter how invisible she was to others, she knew her worth. 52 years old, a widow and a mother of two grown children, Mary had fought through poverty, prejudice, and years of quiet humiliation. But every scar had shaped her into steel. At the security desk, the guard barely glanced at her ID. Step aside, he barked, making her wait while three white employees strolled past without slowing. Mary exhaled slowly as though releasing the weight of it through her breath. She'd learned long ago not to argue, not because she was weak, but because she saved her battles for the moments that mattered. When the guard finally waved her through, she walked across the marble lobby. Commuters in pressed suits rushed past her, eyes on phones, minds on deadlines. She was a ghost among them, pushing her cart of supplies, unseen yet carrying the weight of their messes. But Mary didn't resent it. Cleaning was honest work. It had paid for her daughter's college tuition, kept food on the table, and put her son through trade school. Still, as she rode the service elevator up to the 30th floor, she knew this day was different. The head of maintenance had told her she'd been specially requested for executive duty. Rare, since most executives preferred younger staff who were easier to boss around. His tone suggested punishment, not privilege. Stay invisible, he'd warned. Don't speak unless spoken to. Just clean and get out. The doors opened to the executive floor, and Mary stepped into a world dripping with wealth. Plush carpets, gleaming desks, panoramic views of the city. Fresh flowers filled vases on mahogany tables, and the scent of imported coffee beans drifted from a private lounge. Every inch screamed status. Mary set up her cart and began methodically organizing her supplies. She liked order, liked making a space shine not just on the surface, but deep down, where no one noticed. As she polished the edge of a long conference table, her eyes flicked across scattered documents. She froze. Highlighted names jumped from the page, mostly minorities, older employees, single mothers. Notes scrawled in the margins: excess salary, low adaptability, replaced with younger hire. Before she could look longer, a voice cut through the silence. The help has arrived. Mary turned to see him. Philip Alderman, Chief Operating Officer, immaculately dressed, hair slicked back, eyes cold as stone. Behind him trailed Vice President Gregory Thompson, his smirk already half-formed. Coffee, Black, Alderman barked without looking at her. Mary straightened. I'm with custodial services, sir. Not catering. Alderman's head snapped up. His gaze swept over her like a scan, narrowing with disdain. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. I don't care what you think you're here for. When an executive gives an order, you follow it. Thompson chuckled under his breath. Mary held his stare, calm but unyielding. There's a coffee station down the hall. I'd be happy to show you where it is. For a moment, silence. Then Alderman's jaw tightened, his smile gone. Careful, he whispered. People who forget their place don't last long here. The men walked past her, their laughter echoing down the hall. Mary returned to her work, her hands steady, but inside her chest something tightened. Not fear, anger. That afternoon, she scrubbed the executive bathroom's marble counters when the door swung open. Alderman and Thompson entered mid-conversation. The board won't question our methods if we deliver numbers, Alderman muttered, loosening his tie. Thompson leaned against the wall, smirking. Legal says discrimination suits are climbing. We'll doctor performance reviews. Make it airtight. Mary froze, her cloth hovering above the sink. Focus on the older ones and minorities first, Alderman continued, washing his hands. They're less likely to afford lawyers. Robinson in marketing, 15 years here, high salary, outdated skills. Cut her. Thompson laughed. Replace her with someone cheaper. And younger. The board will love it. Alderman tossed his towel onto the wet counter. Mary reached to pick it up, and in that moment her eyes met his in the mirror. He stopped, stared. Didn't your people learn it's rude to eavesdrop? His voice was sharp as a blade. Phil, Thompson muttered, uneasy. She's just cleaning. No, Alderman interrupted, stepping closer, blocking her way out. She heard us. Mary straightened, her voice steady. I'm just here to clean, sir. Empty your pockets, Alderman snapped, and your bag. Mary complied, placing her gloves, wipes, and a simple lunch on the counter. Nothing incriminating. She looked him square in the eye. Disappointed? She asked quietly. His nostrils flared. Know your place if you want to keep your job. I understand perfectly, Mary said. And she did, more than he could ever imagine. When she left the room, her steps were steady, but her thoughts raced. She'd seen their lists, heard their words, felt their arrogance cut like knives. And she knew this wasn't just about her. It was about every employee they thought they could discard like trash. Mary Ellis was invisible to them, and that was their greatest mistake. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the 31st floor like a spotlight, sharp and unrelenting. Mary wheeled her cart down the carpeted hallway, every step echoing in the silence of wealth. But beneath that calm surface, the storm was already brewing. It began with laughter. A cluster of junior executives leaned outside the conference room, sipping lattes and mocking the janitorial crew. They should bow before us, one sneered. If they want to eat, they should lick the floor clean. Another snickered, kicking his shoe against the wall. Better yet, let's see if they'll scrub these. The words rolled off them like cruel jokes, but when their eyes landed on Mary, the smirks hardened into something sharper. Hey, cleaning lady, one called out. You missed a spot. He pointed to the ground near his feet, where his glossy loafers gleamed perfectly. Mary kept walking, but the second voice cut deeper. What, too proud to kneel? Thought you people liked being on the ground. The others howled with laughter. Mary stopped, turned slowly, and let her gaze settle on them. Not with rage, not with shame, just a look so steady it silenced the air for a second. Then she spoke, soft but unwavering. I don't scrub for boys who don't know the value of work. The laughter faltered, replaced by awkward coughs and glares. Before they could answer, Philip Alderman appeared from behind them, clapping slowly. Well, isn't this charming? His voice dripped with mockery. Our cleaning staff thinks she's a philosopher. He stepped closer, his cologne sharp and suffocating. Do you know where you are, Ms. Ellis? You're in my house, and in my house, you kneel when asked. His shoe tapped against the floor inches from her mop. On your knees. Polish it. The silence was unbearable. The young executives leaned forward, waiting, eyes glittering with cruelty. Mary's heart pounded, but her face betrayed nothing. She bent, not to his shoe, but to her mop. With a deliberate motion, she swiped the floor once and stood tall again. There, she said, the floor shines, just like your reflection. Laughter rippled, but this time it wasn't at her. It was at him. His face flushed crimson, veins pulsing at his temples. You're finished, he hissed. Don't bother showing up tomorrow. Mary wheeled her cart past him, her back straight, her pace calm. But inside, the fire blazed hotter than ever. That night, she sat in her modest apartment, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Bills piled on the table, photos of her children framed neatly on the wall. She thought of her daughter, Maya, the first in their family to graduate college. Of her son, Derek, who had inherited his father's hands and his unshakable sense of justice. She thought of the sacrifices, working through sickness, taking extra shifts, swallowing insults to keep food on the table. And then she thought of Alderman's face, his arrogance, his lists of excess workers, his casual cruelty. She opened a drawer and pulled out an old, battered notebook. Inside, pages filled with years of notes, times, names, comments, every insult and slight she'd endured. But this week's entries burned brightest. Overheard conversations, discarded documents she'd photographed, remarks she'd memorized word for word. She flipped through, her pen scratching as she added details. Invisible, they thought, but invisibility gave her the power of sight. She saw everything they assumed no one noticed. The next day, Alderman wasn't done. He called her into the boardroom while the executives were gathered, their suits gleaming under the morning light. The windows framed the city like a kingdom under their rule. Gentlemen, Alderman announced with a smirk, let's have a little demonstration of loyalty. He gestured to Mary. This woman works here, cleaning up after us. Let's see if she knows her place. He pointed at the shoes of Gregory Thompson, polished black leather. Scrub them. Now, the room erupted in laughter, phones lifted discreetly to capture the moment. Mary's eyes swept across their faces, men and women who wore power like armor, but hid fear behind their smirks. She walked forward, knelt briefly, not to obey, but to pick up the discarded rag on the floor. She stood again, holding it in her hand like a symbol. Her voice carried steady, unshaken. I clean dirt, not dignity, and you gentlemen seem to have confused the two. For a moment's silence, Thompson's smirk faltered. A few chuckles turned into nervous coughs. But Alderman's eyes burned with fury. Get out, he spat. You're fired. Right here, right now. Mary's chest rose and fell once, calm. No, sir, she said, I'm not fired. She turned, her voice echoing across the boardroom. You are. Gasps filled the air. Alderman's face twisted. What did you just... But before he could finish, the boardroom doors opened. A tall man in a crisp suit entered, his presence silencing the room instantly. Chairman Richard Warner, founder of Aldridge Financial, known for his iron will and sharp sense of justice. His eyes locked on Mary, then shifted to Alderman. What's going on here? Mary's hand trembled slightly as she held out the folder she'd been carrying. Copies of the documents, transcripts of conversations, evidence carefully gathered. This, she said, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest, is what's going on. Discrimination, fraud, humiliation of workers. I've seen it all, and I can prove it. Alderman froze, color draining from his face. She's lying. But Warner had already snatched the folder, his sharp eyes scanning page after page. The boardroom grew tense, every executive suddenly silent, the weight of judgment pressing down like a storm. Mary's heart thundered, but she stood tall, her voice carrying like a bell. You asked me to scrub your shoes, but it's not my knees that are dirty. The boardroom erupted, not in laughter, but in whispers, outrage, and fear. For the first time, Alderman's power cracked, and Mary knew the tide was turning. The boardroom air grew heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting sharp lines across the glossy table. Philip Alderman stood rigid, his jaw tight, but a bead of sweat glistened on his temple. For the first time, he was not in control. Chairman Richard Warner's eyes flicked from the documents in his hands to Alderman's pale face. Is this true? His voice was low, dangerous, carrying the weight of authority that could crush or crown in a single word. Alderman forced a laugh, brittle and hollow. This is absurd. She's a cleaning woman. You can't seriously be taking her word. Warner's gaze sliced through him. I'm not taking her word. I'm reading your own handwriting. He held up a page with scrawled notes. Replace with younger hire. Too expensive. Not adaptable. A murmur rippled across the room. The other executives shifted in their seats, eyes darting nervously. Some leaned back, distancing themselves from Alderman as though his downfall were contagious. Mary stood near the doorway, her hands clasped before her, heart pounding, but voice steady. She had dreamed of this moment. Justice not just for her, but for everyone who had been treated like dust beneath expensive shoes. You've endangered this company, Warner said sharply. Discrimination lawsuits, fraudulent records, employee abuse. He slammed the folder onto the table. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Alderman's composure cracked, his face twisted, voice rising. She's lying. She forged those notes. He jabbed a finger toward Mary, his mask of charm gone, replaced by naked desperation. Mary lifted her chin. I didn't forge anything. You left those documents where you thought no one important would ever see them. Invisible hands clean more than dirt, Mr. Alderman. We see what you hide. The silence that followed felt like thunder waiting to break. Then Gregory Thompson, the vice president, who had so often laughed at Alderman's side, cleared his throat. Philip, maybe we should— Shut up, Alderman snapped, his fury turning on his closest ally. You were part of this too. Don't you dare abandon me now. The board gasped, eyes widening. In trying to drag Thompson down, Alderman had unwittingly confessed. Thompson paled, stammering, I only followed your lead. But Warner's hand cut through the chaos. His voice rang out, calm but lethal. Enough. He turned to Mary. Ms. Ellis, thank you for your courage. You may not wear a suit, but you've shown more integrity in 5 minutes than some of these men have in 20 years. Mary's throat tightened, emotion welling. She hadn't expected kindness, not from the man at the very top. Warner shifted his gaze to Alderman, his words like hammer blows. Effective immediately, you are suspended. Pending investigation, I'll see to it you're stripped of authority. Security will escort you out. The color drained completely from Alderman's face. He staggered as though the marble floor had tilted beneath him. You can't do this. I built this company with you. You poisoned it, Warner cut in coldly, and I won't let rot spread. The doors swung open, 2 security guards stepping in. Alderman recoiled, his voice cracking. This isn't over. She's nothing, a janitor. Mary met his gaze for the last time. Her voice was calm, clear, and unforgettable. A janitor just cleaned your career off the floor. The words struck like lightning. Gasps filled the room. Even some of the executives who had mocked her bowed their heads, unable to look at her. Security gripped Alderman by the arms, hauling him toward the exit. His protests echoed down the hallway, but they grew smaller with every step until the door slammed shut behind him. Silence lingered, thick and heavy. Then Warner turned back to the board. This company will change. If we are to survive, every person here must be treated with respect, whether they wear silk ties or work boots. Dignity is not negotiable. Mary's eyes burned, not with anger now, but with release. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift. Warner approached her, extending his hand. You've done this company a great service. And you've done me one too. Thank you. Mary hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was firm, respectful, something she hadn't felt from an executive in decades. The boardroom slowly emptied, whispers trailing behind, but not one person dared laugh anymore. Not one dared look at her as if she were invisible. She had walked in unseen. She walked out unforgettable. The morning after Alderman's removal, the air inside Nexora felt different. Employees who had once kept their heads down now lifted their eyes as they walked the corridors. Conversations that used to hush when an executive passed by carried a little louder, tinged with relief. Rumors spread like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Philip Alderman had been escorted out of the building. His reign of intimidation was over. Mary arrived for her shift at 7 o'clock sharp, her cleaning cart rolling softly across the polished lobby floor. The security guard, the same one who had once demanded extra ID from her, now stood straighter. He cleared his throat and murmured, "Morning, Ms. Ellis." It startled her, a title, a note of respect. "Morning," and she replied with a gentle smile, pushing forward. On the executive floor, heads turned as she passed. Some looked guilty, others uncertain, but a few, especially the younger employees, nodded to her in quiet gratitude. Whispers trailed her. That's her, the woman who stood up to Alderman, the one who saved us. Her supervisor met her at the service elevator. Instead of the usual clipped instructions, his voice held a new edge of deference. "The board chairman wants to see you in his office when you're done here." Mary's brows lifted, but she nodded. She returned to her routine, wiping desks, dusting corners, polishing glass. But every sweep of her cloth felt different now. The work wasn't smaller than her dignity anymore. It was simply work, honest, necessary, and unashamed. By late morning, she stood outside Chairman Warner's office. Sunlight blazed across the room as he gestured for her to sit. He didn't look at her like a subordinate, but like someone whose opinion mattered. "I won't waste your time," Warner began. "What you did yesterday saved this company from disaster. More importantly, it exposed rot that had gone unchecked for far too long." Mary clasped her hands in her lap, unsure how to respond. "I only told the truth, sir." "That's precisely why it matters," he said. "Most people wouldn't have risked it. You did." He leaned back. "I'd like to offer you a role, not as cleaning staff, but as part of our ethics committee, an employee advocate, someone who ensures voices like yours are heard." Mary blinked, her throat tightening. She thought of her daughter in college, of bills that had hung over her like dark clouds. She thought of the nights she had cried silently after being belittled, and of the courage it had taken to keep going anyway. Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "I'd be honored." From that day forward, Mary walked the same halls, but not invisible anymore. She was invited into meetings, asked for her insight. Younger employees, women, and minorities found quiet moments to thank her. One young man whispered, "I stayed because of you." I was ready to quit. A middle-aged woman squeezed her hand and said, "You gave us our voices back." Even Davis, the junior executive who had once laughed nervously in Alderman's shadow, stopped her in the hallway. I, "I'm sorry," he said sincerely, "for not speaking up sooner." Mary studied him for a long moment, then simply replied, "Do better now that you can." Word of Alderman's downfall spread beyond Nexora's walls. Industry articles circulated about corporate accountability, leadership failures, and the bravery of an unnamed employee. Mary didn't seek recognition, but within her community, she became a quiet symbol of resilience. Her daughter called one evening, voice alight with pride. "Mom, my professors are talking about this case in class. They don't know it's you, but I do. You change things." Mary sat in her small kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, tears spilling silently. "I just wanted to make sure you'd never have to kneel like I did," she whispered. The weeks rolled on. Policies shifted, complaints were reviewed, employees reinstated, discriminatory practices dismantled. The executive floor no longer smelled of arrogance and fear, but of something new, possibility. And yet, Mary never let the attention swell her head. She still wore her uniform sometimes, still pushed her cart, not because she had to, but because it reminded her of where she came from. The marble floors no longer felt cold beneath her shoes. They felt like ground she had claimed through courage. One late afternoon, as sunlight painted the glass towers gold, Mary paused by the same conference room where she had once been ordered to kneel. The table gleamed, spotless. Chairs stood neatly aligned. The ghosts of laughter and humiliation lingered in her memory. But now, when she closed her eyes, she didn't hear the executive's cruel voices. She heard Warner's words, her daughter's pride, the whispers of coworkers saying thank you. She whispered to the empty room, never again. The city outside pulsed with life, unaware of the small revolution that had taken place inside these walls. But revolutions didn't always come with riots or banners. Sometimes they came from a woman in a cleaning uniform, armed only with dignity, who refused to be invisible. As Mary gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. She looked back one last time, her voice soft but steady. They thought I was here to clean their floors. Turns out I was here to clean their conscience. And with that, she stepped into the fading light, no longer unseen, no longer small, but forever unforgettable.